If you're given the task to beat Super Mario Bros. 3 as fast as possible, how would you go about it? Well, there's these things called warp whistles that you can pick up in World 1 and use to warp all the way to the last world, World 8. Doing this properly allows you to potentially beat the entire game in under 11 minutes. However, if we're to believe the hundreds of speedrunning experts in the YouTube comment section, then using warp whistles is cheating. So, what about beating Super Mario Bros. 3 as fast as possible without warp whistles? The world record for Super Mario Bros. 3 warpless carries with it a reputation for merciless execution and luck. 8 worlds, each with a wide variety of levels, enemies, and obstacles that you must know exactly how to speed through. Patience is pushed to the limit as the player loses hundreds, or even thousands of runs to small mistakes or just simple misfortune. This is the story of the players who have gone through the challenging yet rewarding journey to obtain the Super Mario Bros. 3 warpless world record. This is the world record progression of Super Mario Bros. 3 warpless. Let's go back to 2010. That January, the first ever Games Done Quick event was held. Classic Games Done Quick.
What? What was that? I've never seen that. That's the craziest thing ever.
This event would later turn into Awesome Games Done Quick, the annual charity speedrunning marathon that raises millions of dollars. Now, the reason I bring this up is because the earliest known warpless speedrun of Super Mario Bros. 3 with video was played at this event. The runner's name was Freddie Anderson, who had the any% world record at this point as well. This run won't be covered in great detail, but the most important concept to understand about it is the P-meter. Super Mario Bros. 3 essentially revolves around the P-meter. When Mario is running on the ground, the meter starts to fill up, and when he's in the air, it decreases. When it's filled all the way, Mario's running speed drastically increases to a speed called P-speed. Runners struggle to figure out ways to build up P-speed in as many levels as possible. You have to run on the ground for as long as you can, strategically slow down and speed up in certain places, and time your jumps just right. Anderson didn't have the strategies needed to build up the P-meter effectively throughout the game, and as a result, he spent much of the time either walking or running without P-speed. For example, this is Anderson's playthrough of 3-2. He's never able to build up the P-meter at the start of the level, and instead has to slowly leap his way across the water and the blocks above it. In a modern speedrun, the player can just barely build it up at the start by waiting and running on each platform. The P-speed earned from this lets the player fly through the level without even touching the water. Anderson's lack of P-speed, on top of a few deaths, helped result in an end time of around an hour and 3 minutes. While it was a solid enough run, it wasn't held to the same level of optimization as other speedruns at the time. It's possible that Anderson himself had a faster run, but his Games Done Quick run appears to be the only one with surviving video. Regardless, one guy thought he had what it took to beat his time. Mitch Flower Power. Mitch began doing warpless speedruns in 2010 with a specific goal in mind. He wanted to beat Anderson's run and get it published on Speed Demo's archive. Speed Demo's archive was more or less the center of speedrunning back then. Runners would submit high-quality recordings of their world record speedruns, and after they were verified, they would be posted on the site for the world to see. On September 21st, 2010, Mitch completed a run that would be verified on Speed Demo's archive a few months later. The time was 55 minutes and 47 seconds. Let's take a look. The 8 worlds in Super Mario Bros. 3 each offer a new set of challenges that the player must overcome. As Mitch made his way through World 1, you can see his expertise of controlling the P-meter. He would run on ledges, just barely fill it up all the way, and then have P-speed as he flew through the air. As important as the levels are, however, there's another incredibly important part to Mario 3 speedruns: the overworld Hammer Brothers. These guys move from space to space after you complete a level or die. If you run into them, you fight them to pick up whatever item they have. Sometimes, like here in World 1, you have no choice but to fight the bro and are forced to pick up the star that he always has. And then there's situations like World 2. There's 2 Hammer Brothers here. One of them has a music box, which stops Hammer Bros from moving across the map for a bit, and one of them has a hammer, which is used to break blocks on the overworld map to skip playing certain levels. Since you don't necessarily need to pick up the music box here, it can be ideal to avoid fighting this Hammer Brother by navigating around him on the map, because each additional Hammer Bro fight takes 10 to 15 seconds. However, sometimes Mitch couldn't tell which Hammer Bro was which, and sometimes they were in his way regardless. In this particular run, the Hammer Bro with the music box was up in the corner. Since Mitch moved around the bottom of the map, he was able to avoid it, fight the Hammer Bro with the hammer, and finish the world. Worlds 3 through 5 can be summarized as fighting some Hammer Brothers, skipping others, and flying through levels as much as you can. Although some parts were slower than optimal, the ability to build up piece speed while trying to avoid touching any enemies is remarkable. Since Mitch did most of this run as Small Mario, touching any enemy would have killed him. World 6 featured a bit of a strange moment. Mitch was flying through the world as normal, and then suddenly turned around and backtracked all the way to the mushroom house to pick up a hammer suit. You might think that this had something to do with manipulating the RNG, or it saved him time somehow, but no, he just forgot to pick it up initially and had to go back and get it. World 7 features a bit of everything. Mitch had been fighting several Hammer Brothers in the previous worlds to pick up items like P-Wings to fly over levels, Clouds to skip levels, and even the occasional Invincibility Star. He used a bunch of these items here in World 7 to skip his way through many of the levels. And finally, there's World 8. Most of it is actually on the tame side. There's several auto-scrolling levels where you simply have to wait for the screen to move to the end of the stage. But eventually, Mitch came to the hands. These 5 boxes on the overworld map, or specifically these 3, make up the hands in World 8. When Mario moves over one, there's a 50-50 chance that a hand will appear and pull him down into a 15 to 20 second stage that must be beaten. Given that there's 3 chances for a hand to pull you down, this means that 12.5% of the time, you'll be able to pass by without getting pulled down at all. It's called getting no hands. Working out the probabilities, you'll find that 3/8 of the time, you'll get 1 hand, losing 15 to 20 seconds, and 3/8 of the time, you'll get 2 hands, losing 35 to 40 seconds. And of course, another 1/8 of the time, you'll get all 3 hands and lose around a minute. Mitch got 2 hands in this run, which lost him some time, but since it was at the very end of an hour-long run, he really didn't mind all that much. After a few more tricky stages and a couple of auto-scrollers, Mitch had made it to the last level. The fight with Bowser normally involves waiting for him to jump and break the blocks below. This takes quite a bit of time, but remember that hammer suit that Mitch picked up in World 6? The Bowser fight is why he picked it up in the first place. Hammers do an incredible amount of damage to Bowser. It turned a fight that would have dragged on into this. All in all, this was quite an impressive run for the time. Impressive enough that Speed Demo's Archive decided to publish it on their website. Mitch didn't die a single time and showed off some really fast strategies. It's also worth noting that instead of playing on an actual NES, Mitch played on the Wii Virtual Console port of Super Mario Bros. 3. Just keep that in mind for later. One thing that was crystal clear after Mitch pulled off this run was the fact that Super Mario Bros. 3 Warpless was a brutal category. Wandering Hammer Brothers and the hands could add dozens of seconds onto your run from bad luck alone, not to mention the P-speed strategies in level after level of an hour-long run. It was intimidating to try running it, and very few people did back then. Mitch would end up playing the category some more a year later, and ended up beating his own record by about 45 seconds. There's not too much that was different about it. The improvements can be generalized into Mitch simply getting better at the game over that period of time. There were fewer mistakes overall, and the run was slightly smoother. What these 2 runs essentially did, however, was establish Mitch as the top runner of Super Mario Bros. 3 Warpless. A couple of months then passed. We're in early 2012, which is when a website called Speedruns Live was in its heyday. Speedruns Live was the headquarters of speedrun races. 2 or more players could connect to a server and have a race room keep track of the total time as they raced to beat their game as fast as possible. On March 29th, 2012, 2 players joined a race room for Super Mario Bros. 3 to do a warpless race. The first was Karua. He was a Mario 3 speedrunner from France with a personal best not far from Mitch's world record. The second racer was Black Hasu. He was a Mario 3 speedrunner from Japan, and it's very hard to find information about him today. Black Hasu was live streaming his side of the race so anybody could watch. The runners began their race, and even though Black Hasu was playing on the Famicom version, which had slower transitions between levels, he pulled ahead early on. By the time the runners were in World 3, Karua decided to just forfeit the race and watch Black Hasu's run from his livestream. What would then occur over the better part of the next hour was remarkable. Black Hasu would finish the run with an end time of 54:46, a new world record. The only problem is that the video for this run doesn't seem to exist anywhere today. People were watching this run as it was being played live, including Karua, so we do know that it happened all those years ago. The only evidence we have now, however, is the Speedrun's live race results page, which shows a race from March 29th, 2012, with Karua finishing in second place with a forfeit, and Black Hasu winning with a time of 54:46. Accounts from runners who saw this run describe a more modern approach to the run as a whole. Mitch's 55-minute runs treated each level as an individual level, where the goal is to simply beat each one as fast as possible. This usually involved just staying a small Mario. Black Hasu, on the other hand, backed up to look at the game as a whole. He decided to pick up the Fire Flower more often. Now, he did have to slow down to pick it up, but it definitely had its benefits. It let him save 4 seconds on each of the Boom Boom fights throughout the game by killing them with fire, as well as letting him use fire in the other levels to clear enemies and ultimately get through them faster. Of course, since the video for this run doesn't exist, people weren't able to see these strats in action until the next world record. Karua's 54:34 from May 2012, an improvement of 12 seconds. He picked up fire in World 1, which he tried to hold on to as long as he could. Of course, the Fire Flower route was still really new here, so there definitely were a few rough patches. He got hit and lost fire in 3-9, 4-6, and 5-7, and had to pick the Fire Flower back up as soon as he could each time. He also died in World 6, and instead of getting right back into the level, he just sat there in the overworld. Yeah, he thought the run was dead, but decided to just keep going for the heck of it. Karua was also able to show off a pretty fast 7-1 clip. Instead of playing through 7-1 as normal, which is a pretty long stage, it's possible to clip into the wall and ceiling right at the start of the level and skip straight to the end. Now, not only does this trick require you to jump in the perfect location, but your sub-pixel position also needs to be just right for the clip to even have a chance of working. Sub-pixels define Mario's position on a scale smaller than the pixel, and it's not usually possible to control them. Karua was able to get it on his 3rd try, which was pretty good considering that the previous world record with video footage, Mitch's 55:04, took 6 tries. And then, after getting no hands in World 8, Karua closed out a run 12 seconds faster than Black Hasu's lost record. All in all, while there were many unpolished sections, the use of Fire Flower throughout the run significantly helped. The key word here was potential. The Fire Flower strats had potential. How far would people be able to take them? Mitch decided to test that question less than a month later. Just 3 weeks after Karua's world record, Mitch fired right back with a 40-second improvement, a time of 53:53. While Mitch too was using the fire strats, his methodology was slightly different. Karua's strategy was to pick up fire and then hold onto it as long as he could. Mitch's strategy was to pick up items and then intentionally lose them to damage boost through specific sections. He did this repeatedly throughout the run. Fancier P-speed strategies, especially in World 7, helped him gain more time over Karua. In 7-3, for example, he would run right up to an enemy or ledge, pixels away from getting hit or falling off. It's exactly what he needed to build up P-speed each time. By this point, in late 2012, a friendly rivalry between Mitch and Karua had developed. These guys traded the world record back and forth multiple times throughout 2012. The next 4 world records, however, would all be obtained by Karua. Over the course of about 6 months, Karua would take the world record from a 53:53 down to a 53:02. One key improvement was the fire kill on Bowser. Picking up the hammer suit in World 6 to bust out right before fighting Bowser used to be the strategy, because killing him with just 4 hammers was much faster than having to spam him with more than 30 fireballs. However, because you have to go out of your way to pick up the hammer suit in World 6 from a mushroom house, you end up gaining several seconds from just hanging on to fire in World 8 to kill Bowser. Karua's item routing also got a bit more strategic. In stage 7-2, for example, runners used to use a P-Wing, a valuable item, to fly over the first section. Karua switched to an invincibility star, which he had sitting in his inventory anyway. And probably the most important part of these 4 runs is that in one of them, Karua got what's known as the early hammer. Early Hammer results from a series of incredibly lucky events in the World 2 overworld map. This is a diagram of World 2. There are two Hammer brothers. One starts here and has a music box. We'll be ignoring him for now. The second one starts here and has a hammer, which can break down these barriers to help you move to get to new areas on the map sooner. Hammer brothers move one space after each level you complete or die in, and the direction they move is random. If they move on top of a level, or on top of another Hammer brother, then they'll move an additional time until they reach an open spot on the map. Normally this works out just fine. The player will move through 2-1, 2-2, the fortress, up past 2-3, through the sun level, either up past 2-4 or down past 2-5, and then the pyramid level, before finally reaching the ending airship. The player picks up the hammer somewhere in this rectangle on the map, and the hammer is then used in World 4 to break this barrier and skip past the fortress. Keep in mind though, the direction the Hammer brother moves after each level is random, so theoretically, this exact series of moves could happen. He moves up here after 2-1, up here after 2-2, over and across 2-4 after the fortress since he can't stop on the level itself, and then down and to the left after 2-3. Instead of reaching him somewhere in this rectangle, you reach him on this space, which is before the sun level. So, you could collect the hammer here, go down here and break the block with it, and then skip both the sun level and 2-5. Unfortunately, the odds in the Hammer brother making the exact moves you need to reach him after 2-3 are around 5%. If everything does work, you end up gaining around 45 seconds from skipping the two levels, but keep in mind that by using the hammer in World 2, you don't have it for World 4. So you can't break the block and skip the fortress, and you lose half a minute by having to play through it. Still, it's a pretty nice net gain of 15 seconds overall if you're lucky enough to get it. But this was only scratching the surface of the potential of early Hammer. Mitch's next world record, a 52-59, would demonstrate another layer. Since the Hammer brothers are usually off screen, and you can't see where they move, it can be tricky to tell exactly how close you are to getting an early Hammer. So, Mitch came up with an idea. Since the Hammer brother is forced to move one space after you die, he would repeatedly die in 2-3 to try to get the Hammer brother to come across, so you could ultimately avoid playing the level and instead get an early Hammer that would skip 3 levels instead of just 2. He'd just force the Hammer brother to move, and hope that he moved in the right directions to come across 2-3. Getting him to come over in just 1 death, or a 1 death early Hammer, saves well over a minute in World 2, netting the player over half a minute overall. But sometimes it could take a few more deaths to get him to come over. Getting a 2 death or better early hammer has been calculated at about 1-2% likely, and after 4 deaths you end up losing as much time as the trick saves and are forced to reset. This created a bit of an ideological divide between the top 2 runners of the game, Mitch and Karua. Mitch had the world record with the 52-59, and he had a habit of getting a ton of runs to World 2 and just dying over and over to try for early hammer. He obviously lost a ton of runs here, but would occasionally get one on a super good pace as a result. Karua, on the other hand, wasn't a huge fan of dying for an early hammer, and instead just took as many runs as he could past World 2. If he happened to run into the hammer bro after 2-3, then he took it, but it usually didn't save as much time as when Mitch would get it before 2-3. So, which strategy was better? Mitch got his 52-59 with early hammer in May 2013, but Karua beat it by 2 seconds without early hammer 4 months later. Where did he make up more than 30 seconds saved by early hammer? Well, part of it was by cleaning up mistakes from Mitch's run. Mitch lost fire in World 4 of his run, and couldn't pick it back up until close to the end of World 5. So, he lost a bunch of time from not having fire for the boom boom fights, and having to use slower strategies in other stages. Karua was also able to avoid fighting a hammer brother that Mitch had to fight in World 4, and got the 7-1 clip in 5 tries versus Mitch's 8. These time saves added up to just a bit more than the approximately 40 seconds that Mitch's 1 death early hammer saved, and since both runners got 1 hand in World 8, Karua was able to finish just 2 seconds ahead of Mitch with the 52-57. Since Karua was able to get so many more runs past World 2, he had more opportunity to get cleaner runs with smoother later worlds. Just 2 weeks later though, Mitch was able to beat Karua back. He didn't have the chance to get early hammer this run, but he made up a bunch of time elsewhere. As you can see by his splits, he fell over a minute behind his early hammer record after World 2, but made up more than half of it in World 4 because he didn't have to play the fortress. He made up more time in World 5 because he was able to hold on to Fire Mario, then pulled ahead after a very strong World 7. World 8 was more of the same. cleaning up mistakes from his previous run, and then getting no hands. A 52-23 without early hammer. But wait a second, remember how I mentioned before that Mitch and Karua both did their runs on Wii Virtual Console? Remember how I said to keep it in mind for later? Well, not long after Mitch got a 52-23, runners discovered that playing on the Virtual Console version of Super Mario Bros. 3 was actually losing them about 15 seconds in each run. See, Wii Virtual Console games actually run about 0.5% slower than NES games. It's not really noticeable when playing the game normally, but over the course of an hour-long speedrun, the time adds up drastically. So, Mitch switched to playing on an NES, and got back to doing more warpless runs, this time with a 15-second advantage. February 19th, 2014. Mitch was doing Super Mario Bros. 3 warpless attempts, and happened to get a 2-death early hammer. Keep in mind, the odds in getting a 2-death or better early hammer is less than 2%, so this was a big opportunity for Mitch. He was 48 seconds ahead after World 2.
Look at that!
As always with early hammer, time was lost in World 4 because of having to play the fortress. But after that, he just picked up time in each split. This was turning into a really nice run, and by the time he entered World 7, he was over half a minute ahead. But the biggest obstacle in World 7 was right at the start, the 7-1 clip.
Come on! That's fucking bullshit, man. I've wasted so much time there.
10 tries. It hurt, but luckily for Mitch, the rest of the world was great, so he didn't lose a huge amount of time overall.
Oh, I don't know what these splits are. What's going on?
So, now Mitch had just one focus, the hands. He was over half a minute ahead, and had the luxury of some wiggle room on the hands. Getting 3 hands would eliminate any chance at the record, but getting 2 hands or better would make it possible. 46 minutes into the run, it was all coming down to this.
Oh my god! Oh my god! What? Early hammer. Okay, everyone be quiet. Everyone's gotta be quiet right now. Y'all gotta be quiet. Shh. I got it! I think I got it! Oh my god, I got it! I got it! Yes! You can't beat this run. I'm sorry. But you can't beat that. Oh my god. Kitty, do you understand what just happened? Early hammer, no hands. Look at the splits, dude. Like, you can't beat it. There's nothing you could do.
Well, Mitch said it himself. You could not beat this run. Mitch and Karua had battled for years, but this run was the ultimate one. Early hammer, no hands. Multiplying the odds of those 2 tricks alone, we're looking at no better than 1 in 400 odds of getting a run this good. And that, of course, doesn't factor in the odds in getting good luck with all of the Hammer Brothers, and all of the execution you must nail in each stage of the game. And that's why it stood, and stood, and stood. For 1 month. "32 days later, it was beaten by a run that did not get early hammer, by a runner that was neither Karua nor Mitch. Russian speedrunner Outside Lutz beat Mitch's so-called unbeatable run by exactly 1 second. How did he do it? Well, the most important thing to realize is that Mitch's run really wasn't all that perfect. He was excited in the moment, which is why he said it was unbeatable. But, for example, the 10th try clip in 7-1 set him back 20 seconds versus Outside Lutz's first try clip. That right there nearly eliminated the advantage gained from early hammer. He also got some sketchy Hammer Brother movements, which ultimately led to a couple of extra Hammer Brother fights.
He's gotta move back up. Please move back up. What a son of a bitch.
Improving sections like that led to Outside Lutz and Karua 5 months later, both improving Mitch's run by a few seconds without the early hammer. But in May of 2015, Mitch blew them out of the water once more with an amazing 51-28, once again without early hammer. One notable improvement from this run was the reintroduction of the hammer suit into the route. Mitch figured out that by picking it up in stage 7-8 and preserving P-speed throughout the rest of the level, You could then use it to kill Bowser quickly at the end and potentially pick up a couple of seconds over the Fire Flower. This was very difficult to do fast enough to save any time at all, so certain runners opted to just stick with the Fire Flower the whole way. But Mitch used the hammer strats in this run, and was able to get the first warpless world record in the year 2015. Speaking of 2015, that was the year that another warpless runner began to threaten the world record. Cujo. Cujo played several different categories of Super Mario Bros. 3 throughout 2014 and 2015. His warpless personal best got lower and lower. 54 minutes, 53 minutes, then 52 minutes, and he slowly turned into a world record contender. Cujo eventually began doing warpless world record attempts, but he had one problem. His hand luck in World 8 was just awful. He eventually started highlighting and listing all the world record pace runs he had that died to bad hand luck at the very end. The number reached 18, before finally, one day, it happened.
Holy shit.
All he had to do now was lock down and focus. He just had to not get hit by anything and make it to the end. And...
oh my god.
the run died because he got hit in the very last autoscroller before Bowser. Thankfully for Cujo though, a few months later, he would get another chance after a run with first try 7-1 clip. The hands were nice to him, and Cujo was finally able to get his first warpless world record.
Yes! Fucking world record!
Cujo's run only beat the world record by 1 second, but it would stand a lot longer than Mitch's record. Mitch's 51:28 stood for 4 months, from May 2015 to September 2015. Cujo beat it that September, and entering the year 2017, his 51:27 was still the world record. However, in early 2017, Rta decided to come back to speedrunning Super Mario Bros. 3 warpless. Rta hadn't achieved a warpless world record since 2014, but he had a goal he wanted to accomplish. Not only did he want to beat Cujo's 51:27, but he wanted to take it a step further. He wanted a 50-minute time. That would require taking nearly half a minute off the world record. Could that be done? The potential was definitely there, but Rta wanted some more help to get it. So he went into the lab to figure out different routes he could take to save some more time. The biggest thing he decided on was to finally start using the 7-9 clips. The old route at the end of World 7 was to use the cloud to skip over stage 7-9 straight to the fortress. This is because 7-9 is normally a super slow stage. You've got to go up, down, left, and right, all the way through this maze-like level. The new route Rta used was a bit different. He was not going to use the cloud for 7-9, and instead use it in the World 8 fortress. He was just going to play through 7-9, and in order to make it fast enough to make it worth it, he had to use these clips into the walls. There were two different routes of doing these clips, a 4-clip route that saved up to 16 seconds, and a 2-clip route that saved up to 8 seconds where you could also pick up a Fire Flower if you needed it. Keep in mind, each of these clips required both a pixel-perfect jump and lucky subpixel positioning. Each missed clip costs about 4 seconds, and given that runners could sometimes spend a dozen tries on a clip, this was really risky to go for. He would need to get the 2 clips in 4 total tries to break even, or the 4 clips in 8 tries. But in February 2017, Rta had to run 17 seconds ahead of his personal best in the World 7. When he came to 7-9, he decided to go for the clips, but was only going to do the 2-clip version because he needed to pick up a Fire Flower. And the clips didn't go too well. It took him 5 tries to get the 2 clips, ending with a net loss of 4 seconds. This run, however, would go on to get no hands in World 8 and be a new world record of 51:20, 21 seconds away from his goal. A month and a half later, Rta was on a run that was very close after World 7. The 7-9 clips hadn't done him any favors. It took him 8 tries to get the 4 clips, meaning he broke even on them. But he did have a few seconds to save in World 8 if everything went perfectly. And then... this clip normally was much easier than the other clips. You had to get into the gap as Big Mario, then get ejected out of the wall to the other side. but he missed it first try and had to waste a couple of seconds doing it again. No big deal, right? Tied world record. Well, shoot. It was okay though. Just 3 days later, Kurua got a run with a post 2-3 early hammer, the type that skips 2 levels and saves 15 seconds overall. The 7-9 clip started off poorly, with the first clip coming 3rd try. But then... six tries overall, meaning a net gain of 8 seconds for Kurua. He then got a hand in World 8, but the time buffer he had still allowed for a 51-13 world record, 14 seconds from his goal. Including this world record, Kurua then had a streak of 20 runs that made it to World 8 on record pace that got at least one hand. He didn't highlight them like Kujo did, but it did lead to a couple of months without any new records. And then came June 6, 2017. It started off like any other run. He fell behind against his early hammer run, and then made up most of the time in World 4. And then, in the World 6 Fortress, he clipped into the ground. If he was a pixel too low, he would have hit the spikes below. If he was a pixel too high, he would have just landed normally. Clipping like this, however, skipped the room before the boss and ejected him right where he needed to be, saving 7 seconds. World 6 ended up being a gold split. It was the fastest Kurua had ever completed World 6. He was ahead of the world record. Then, he had this happen in 7-1. And then, he had this happen in 7-9. Then he went into World 8. After months of grinding for a 50, Kurua was on sub 51 pace after the hands for the first time ever. A few stages later, his journey finally came to an end. The first 50 in Super Mario Bros. 3 Warpless history. Kurua had accomplished his goal. His journey started by beating Black Hasu back in 2012 with a 54-34, and culminated with a 50-57 in June 2017. Not long after this run, Kurua retired from speedrunning. He said that it's possible he'll make a return someday, but regardless, his legacy from Super Mario Bros. 3 speedrunning is honorable. World record after world record in every category, and developing a long-lasting rivalry with Mitch, the only other runner to consistently match his level of play. But Mitch wasn't done yet. He wanted to get the world record back. Getting another sub 51 wasn't going to be easy, so he decided to do attempts every single day starting in January 2018 until he broke the record. And since he's Mitch, he was going to grind for early hammer. He wanted the time save. He lost run after run in World 2 as he grinded for early hammer, but he did eventually see results. In March, he got his first personal best in almost a year with a 51.02.
So close. So close, man.
He was headed on the right track, just a few seconds away from Kurua's world record. It was inevitable that the record would be his soon. But nobody expected the run that would come on March 24th, 2018.
Oh my god, dude. World 2, stop. For RTA runners, it saves no time.
It started with a post 2-3 early hammer in World 2. The splits on the left compare against his 51.02, and the splits on the right compare against Kurua's world record. He had a very smooth World 3 and World 4. A gold split in World 5.
That's so dumb. That's such a dumb time save.
After World 6, he was 16 seconds ahead of Kurua's world record. Then came the 7-1 clip.
Ridiculous!
He was so far ahead of Kurua at this point that since he had the hammer suit, he decided to avoid messing with the 7-9 clips. So he went back to the old strategy of using a cloud to skip 7-9 and instead playing the fortress in World 8. This was some careful strategy for Mitch. Here's why. He was 43 seconds ahead after World 7, but it's misleading. Part of that lead was from skipping stage 7-9. He was going to lose 40 to 45 seconds in World 8 from having to play the fortress. But, since he had the hammer suit while Karua did not, he was going to gain 9 or 10 seconds back from being able to use it in World 8. He also had a few seconds to save from mistakes that Karua made. That meant he was on pace for somewhere around a 50-43, and that was a ridiculous pace. But he needed to play really well, and on this run more than any other, he needed to get no hands. This was it. Mitch's best chance ever to get a sub 51. He made his way through autoscrollers and other stages. He went through 8-1, and then he entered 8-2.
Unbelievable.
Devastating. This shot right here is supposed to take out the sun. It missed by pixels. After getting a bad pattern from the sun after that, it ended up being right where he needed to land, and he lost the hammer suit. Any advantage he had over Karua was wiped away. He was neck and neck. It was going to be close.
Did I do it? Did I? I don't think I did it. I did it. I did it. Oh my god.
50-55, and that is where the world record stands today. But I can guarantee that's not where it's going to stand in the future. A few months after his 50-55, Mitch discovered possibly the most revolutionary trick that Mario 3 Warpless has ever seen. It's possible to manipulate the game into giving you an early hammer every single run. Getting an early hammer is determined by where the Hammer Brothers moved after each level. The game determines which direction they move based on the exact frame you end the level on. For example, if you ended on frame 6523, this guy will move up, but if you ended a frame later, he'll move a different direction instead. It's possible to actually get a deathless early hammer with perfect movements after every level. They move toward each other, then get caught on top of each other and can't separate until they're across stage 2-3. So, what Mitch did was create a tool-assisted speedrun, which lets him use save states, slow down, and other tools to let him end levels on the exact frames he needs to. This tool-assisted speedrun ends each level in World 2 on the frame necessary for the Hammer Brothers to move closer together, and eventually on top of each other. The end result is a no-death early hammer. What the player can then do is play this tool-assisted speedrun back while they're doing their speedrun, and try to time the end of each level in World 2 with the tasks. They usually have only one frame, or a 60th of a second to time each of these, or sometimes a couple of frames. Obviously, it's not easy to get all these timings correctly in a run. As it's still pretty new, no world records have been accomplished yet with the manipulation. But, Mitch has had some success with it in the few attempts he's done.
Yeah, baby! Woo!
And given that this type of early hammer provides a 30 to 35 second time save over no early hammer, this game still has a lot of history in front of it. So, questions must be asked. Will the rivalry between Karua and Mitch resume in the future?
I got it! I think I got it! Oh my god, I got it!
Will a new challenger rise up?
Yes!
We'll just have to wait and see. Thanks for watching.